Let's get this party started!
He's shining a light in the dark corners of our media.
You are fake news.
Our government.
Handling of classified documents.
And our culture.
Don't trust anyone.
It's common sense amidst chaos.
Let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome.
Here's your host, Ike Wingate.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the show. It is Thursday, July 10th, 2025. Glad you are with us today as it just grows and grows and grows. And by it, I mean the news cycle and everything that is going on in our world today. We are going to get into the investigation of James Comey and John Brennan. We are going to get into more of the Epstein list conversation. Trump's response the other day was quite swift in that cabinet meeting, and we're going to talk through that as well as amnesty. The president has weighed in on that. Will there be amnesty? We've talked at length about the immigration issue here and the ways to solve the labor shortages that will ultimately occur, and cloud seeding in Texas. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. I mean, we talked about it on Monday or Tuesday or whenever we were live last, and we confirmed cloud seeding absolutely happened the day before. And you've got the CEO of this cloud seeding company going on all kinds of media. And it is, sort of, I would call it a little bit of a PR campaign. The guy's likable. He continues to be asked about, why are you trying to play God? And he says, well, we're stewards of God, of God's creation. Should we do everything we possibly can to steward it? I don't know about that. It sounds good. But the facts are cloud seeding occurred the day before. The question is, how long does it stay in the atmosphere? He says, hours. Well, how long are we talking about? So the point of view coming from this guy is that the cloud seeding, dissipated well in advance of the monumental flooding that occurred. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. We will be checking in on those comments. Whatever platform you're watching on, help us get the word out. That might mean smashing the like button, the thumbs up, the heart. If you're watching on X, we are coming to you both on my X feed at Ike Wingate as well as the Died Suddenly feed. So heart the post and repost, because we're going to get into all of these things today. If you're watching on TikTok, of course, you can double tap, you can share, you can do all the things. If you want to see what we're showing you on the screen, you have to follow us over to X or Rumble, which you can do so by clicking the link in my bio. For anyone interested, our website is IkeReport.com, IkeReport.com, and you can also contribute to the show. We are funded by your contributions. We hope and pray that we can just cover our costs, our hard costs, not me. I don't get paid. And if you want to help us cover the hard costs so we can continue to bring you an independent perspective on this, you can do so via Cash App or Venmo at IkeReport.com. No one is telling me what I can or cannot say here. No one. You might say, well, that's a good thing. It usually is. Sometimes I get myself into trouble because I just say whatever I'm thinking, which is dangerous. But how many media platforms do you know that are out there, whether it's cable news or network news, or even independent people like me that have major sponsorships that you don't go in a certain area, you can't talk about this, can't talk about that. I mean, that is one of the advantages of no one paying me, is I'm not beholden to anyone. Oh, they'll stay away from that category because, we have interests there. It happens. I promise you it happens. Even in the purest of intentions, it happens. I mean, I've had conversations with people in various industries that you would love. But because of the industry they're in, they don't want you to cover certain topics because it can make them look bad. I understand it from a business perspective, but from a free speech, absolute truth perspective, there's a conflict there. And so that is what I bring you, for better or for worse, without any sponsorships, without any revenue coming into this show. We are completely free to say anything, no matter who it might offend. That's not the goal. The goal is not to recklessly offend. even though the truth can be offensive at times. It's just to tell the truth. And so when you contribute to this show, you are part of the unfiltered truth. And you might be saying, oh, this is, on TikTok, they always say there's a right-wing nut job. Well, here's the thing. While I'm conservative and believe the Republicans are the best of the worst as far as political parties go, I'm not beholden to them. I call them out just as much as I do the Democrats in many cases. And I will call out our president at times when I disagree with him. Did you know that that's like an American value to be able to speak the truth? What you get on a lot of these outlets that you are consuming is talking points to go along with the parties. That's what you get. Because I promise you, if you're calling people out, you are going to get phone calls. Say, what are you doing? You're undermining our mission here. Well, you're doing something that is not right. When it comes to freedom and transparency, liberty, it happens. You're getting a very distilled down, filtered perspective that aligns. And you might say, what is wrong with this guy? Ike has gone crazy. No, I've just been peeking behind the veil a lot lately and realizing that even in the places you think they tell the truth, they avoid a lot of things because of the interests involved. Now, I'm not going to go all crazy like Candace Owens here. Believe me, I think she's gone completely nuts. And that does happen. The bigger you get, the less you take on constructive perspectives. But behind the veil, you see, there is undoubtedly an agenda. Sorry. I mean, you might say this guy's coming off kind of jaded right now. Yeah, I kind of am. I kind of am a little jaded, to be completely transparent with you. Because you have the media side of it, but then you have the political side of it. I mean, I'm watching what's going on and thinking, what the heck is happening? Why isn't there accountability? Who's making these decisions? I think we're at the point of burnout, politically speaking, right now. That's my perspective as I am watching social media and I am seeing and having conversations, seeing what people are saying, writing, whatever, and having conversations. It's like there is fatigue, great fatigue, frustration. People feel let down, which may be a lesson. I think there's a lesson in that. In if we are putting the value or our hope in politics, boy, are we going to be disappointed. I think that's what we're seeing right now. We put so much hope and trust in politics that it lets us down. That's not a place to put hope in reality. I just want you to walk with me through an exercise here. When is a politician, any politician, okay, talk about President Trump. I think he's a great president, but he's still a president and he's still in politics and he still has to make decisions based on many interests. That's a fact. Well, no, Donald Trump, he's out for the American people no matter what. I believe that's what he wants to do. But he is inundated daily, hourly, moment by moment with interests all over the globe. It's a tough spot to be in. But I ask you to take a step back and say, when has any politician, anywhere, at any time, ever done anything to make your life better specifically? When have they ever called you and said, hey, I want to help you with an opportunity? Has that ever happened to you? If it has, you're in the minority because most of the time we anguish and we toil and we stress and we cry and we get angry. Did I say angry? I think I said angry twice. That's on purpose. About all these things going on. It's about to hit the fan. And you know what happens? Nothing. Does your life change? Does my life change because of it? Not really. Now, you could argue one specific instance, and I would say COVID. COVID affected all of us based on the control that was instituted and the madness and the shame and everything that was hitting us. But if you just stepped away from media, apart from, being shamed into wearing a mask in a public place and all these, if you stepped away from media, how would your life actually be? Pretty thick coming from a guy who's on media, right? But have you thought about this? If you completely disengaged from the constant inundation of information and fear peddling and just lived your life, went to work, did what you need to do, took care of your family, would your life have been affected differently? And that's an extreme circumstance, but I just look at all the things that are going on, and it's like you read this, you read that. It's just like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Like, psh, 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 psh. And it's just made me wonder, is my life better off being so in tune with this stuff? Is your life better off? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it is. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What are you doing, man? You've got to stay in the know. I agree. You need to be aware of what's going on, but you don't need to be obsessed with what's going on. And that's so easy to do. And this week has been a prime example of good grief. Why am I torturing myself? Is that you? It certainly has been me at times. I'm just putting it out there, okay? To say, if you're thinking that, you're not crazy. Or we're crazy together. But I go back to the point, and that is, I think a healthy way of looking at politics is like looking at sports. And yes, politics can affect your life depending on how much control. And we should be aware of when government is trying to control us, we need to push back. I think we have a duty to do that. But most of what we see on the news and hear in politics is like a sporting event, our side versus their side and vice versa. And it works when there's conflict. Have you thought about that? Politics, the construct of politics is constant conflict. And so while there are issues we must be engaged in, okay, don't hear me saying just check out and don't pay attention. But what I'm trying to relay is that a large portion of the things that we pay attention to never happen or never affect us one way or the other. A large portion of it. It's true. And so maybe a healthy way to look at it is, hey, I like to, this is the form of entertainment that I like. I like to be engaged in it. But what it does is, if you are obsessed with it, it can drive you mad. It can totally, sever relationships. And it can let you down. And so I go back to the high level point in that is, don't put your hope in politics. Don't put your hope in political figures. They will let you down. The only true hope in this world, I believe, is Jesus Christ, who has come to earth as a sacrifice for sinners, to redeem them, to reconcile them to God, so that they may live a life that emulates his teachings, tells other people about him, and ultimately receives an eternal hope in glory forever. Everything else will let you down at one point or another. And I'm not trying to be a fatalist here. I'm just being a realist from the standpoint of, if your hope is in politicians and politics and the government and the news calling things out, it's a hamster wheel, friends. It's a hamster wheel. And don't even get me started on social media. Social media will rot your brain. I know. I'm in it every single day. Every day. It doesn't mean you have to stop doing any of that. I'm not calling anybody out. I'm just saying, filter it through the perspective of conflict sells in politics, and you can't have ultimate hope in any politician, no matter how good they are or seem. So we've set the stage. All right. We understand that, right? Hopefully so. Now, that being said, we have a lot of politics and news to get to. And I'm just looking at through the lens of, people are going to let you down. People are not going to do everything you want them to do. And I am not going to stress about this and worry about this from the standpoint of, oh no, I have to defend everything my side does. That's what happens when somebody on the right makes a bad decision or is doing, your liberal friends, whoa, what's going on over here? And I get this like internal, like, oh crap, I've got to find a way to present this in a way that it is a good thing. Why? Are any of these people paying you? They're certainly not paying me. Why do we feel the obligation to defend decisions that we had nothing to do with? It just seems like madness sometimes. Anyway, all right. I did not intend to go off on that. Let's just get to it. That's why you came here. If you haven't tuned out already, I know I've been accustomed to bringing you what's going on, talking about it in an unfiltered way, and I'll continue to do so for however long that is. And that's what you expect. But I just want, out of a place of responsibility, I want to make sure that I'm saying that. And maybe it's irrelevant to you, but I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. Okay? And maybe you are too. Now, all that being said, this is some good news, but where will it go is the question. FBI has launched a criminal investigation into John Brennan, the former CIA director, James Comey, former FBI director, over the Trump-Russia probe. Okay? James Comey is the kind of guy who acts like he is just noble in everything he does, but he is a complete partisan hack, pretends to be a Republican, but this guy has sworn allegiance to the government, to the deep state, to the Beltway, whatever you want to call it, as the answer to everything. And he believes, I think, that it is his duty, no matter what, to uphold the Republic because he's such an important guy. He's really a wolf in sheep's clothing, but that sheep's clothing is worn off a long time ago. I mean, his wolf is showing. The FBI has launched this investigation over this Trump-Russia collusion. CIA Director John Ratcliffe sent evidence of wrongdoing to Kash Patel. The referral was reported by Fox News. The Brennan investigation comes following a new report from the CIA that condemned the way intelligence agencies, including the CIA under Brennan, concluded that Russia had interfered with the 2016 presidential election in President Trump's favor. The FBI has declined to comment. I was asked about this yesterday while on Newsmax 2, and here's how it went.
host of the Ike Wingate Show, Ike Wingate, along with Democratic strategist Jenna Arnold. Good afternoon to you both. Ike, I want to start with you. We now learn that the DOJ is opening up an investigation into Brennan and Comey. What do you make of that?
I think it's just about time, maybe a little bit late, but certainly it's time, because we know, based on the Durham report, that Jim Comey and John Brennan were in the White House with President Obama, Vice President Biden, specifically talking about this Steele dossier. They had a name for it. They called it the Clinton Plan. They knew all along this was being paid for by the Clinton campaign, yet Jim Comey continued to authorize FISA warrants without probable cause to spy on the Trump campaign over and over. So there's no mystery here. These guys were involved in using our government, our Department of Justice, to spy on Trump's campaign. And it is time for accountability, without a doubt. And I hope it's coming. And I hope we actually do see some literal jail sentences come out of this.
Yeah, more than an investigation, but some prosecutions.
Okay. And so then she asks this young lady, Jenna Arnold, who's a liberal, who you may recall her name. She went viral on CNN when she said there's going to be no one to pick blueberries with all the deportations. So I want you to listen really closely to her response and tell me what she meant by it, because I have watched this 2 or 3 times. Obviously, I was listening to it live. I cannot make sense of what she said.
As well. Jenna, what is your take to this breaking news?
Thanks so much for having me. Hi, Ike. Hi, Kelly. This is a tough one for me. I am a firm believer in making sure that we hold up the magnifying glass to all of the processes and all of the systems, primarily so that we can maintain what I believe is our shared values around justice and around holding, in some cases, complex truths. My fear for this, Ike and Kelly, is that it will turn into a politicized headline when we have so many examples over the past, not just 6 months, the last administration or any administration before that, where the justice process becomes politicized. And it doesn't necessarily feel like there's some focus on the larger common good beyond it. And I feel like this might be one of those examples where the process itself gets weaponized. And my fear with this in particular is that because it's one of those backdated subjects, and I hate to sort of flippantly say but her emails or Hunter's laptop, that there's these sound bites, these moments, these chapters in history that turn into, reality television shows for the sake of politics versus just being very protective over transparency and our collective value over what we're doing in the best interest of the American public.
Yeah, I think that the probe is trying to get rid of the politicization within the DOJ. That.
All right. Can you make any sense of what she just said? She talked for, I don't know, 90 plus seconds, and I cannot make sense. Seems like a nice person, but I have no idea what she said. Maybe you can make sense of it. I don't know. Mostly Penny has commented regarding John Brennan, saying, watching Brennan talking and shaking like a leaf, saying he was innocent. LOL. Can you find that clip and drop it in the chat, Mostly Penny? Help me do a little producing on the fly here. I've tried to find it briefly, and I passed by it earlier in my timeline. I can't seem to find it at the moment. X is acting weird. Maybe Grok has taken over again. Yeah, that's another big controversy, that Grok is unfiltered and saying things that are not politically correct. But anyway, if you can find it, Mostly Penny, please drop it in the chat and we will play it here. It was on MSNBC this morning. Yeah, it was. I've tried to find it. Can't find it. But anyway, just to finish out this clip, I was then asked about Joe Biden's doctor pleading the fifth in that hearing yesterday.
Clearly was weaponized against President Trump's run in 2016. But moving on, other news today on Capitol Hill, Joe Biden's physician, Kevin O'Connor, was on Capitol Hill. He showed up. However, he pled the fifth to basically every single question Comer's committee asked him, including, were you asked to lie about President Biden's mental decline? Why wouldn't he answer this question unless he was asked to lie?
That is the $1 million question. It's hard to grasp any logical, truthful explanation when you plead the fifth to avoid talking about the 25th. And you could say as a doctor, well, I didn't want to disclose things that would violate HIPAA. Well, you could answer a lot of questions without violating HIPAA. This was a matter of national security. This was a matter of continued lies that we were told from the media, from inside the Biden administration. I mean, we know, based on even a recent book that's coming out this week, that Biden was not, under the cover of COVID, allowed to meet with people. In fact, he didn't meet with his pollsters for years, which I've wondered the entire time. When Biden went out and said the economy was doing great and he was doing great in the polls, despite what reality said, did he actually even know what was going on? Were they feeding him pretend information? The administration absolutely used COVID as the mechanism to cover all of this up. And when you have a doctor who's not even willing to ask questions and he's pleading the fifth, the optics alone look horrible, just like a preemptive pardon for General Milley and Dr. Fauci. This smells of corruption. This is not something that shows transparency and a willingness to expose the truth.
All right, Ike Wingate, Jenna Arnold, thank you both for stopping by.
Thanks, Kelly. All right, I got two questions. She got one. I kind of felt bad for her. She didn't even get a chance to answer another question. And you can tell when Kelly Sadler there says that's the end, watch her face real quick. She's just like, what? That's the way I felt. I'm like, all the prep you do, everything you do to prepare for this stuff, and then it's just over. It's frustrating to expose the truth.
All right, Ike Wingate, Jenna Arnold, thank you both for stopping by.
Thanks, Kelly. She's like, huh. Anyway, I'm not, making light of it. But it is certainly something I noticed, right? Did you notice that? All right, I found this Brennan clip. I have not seen this clip, actually. Let's take a look real quick. Brennan on MSNBC earlier today. Let's watch it together.
As you point out, Marco Rubio, who, he's a different person now, quite frankly. I think when he was in the Intelligence Committee, I think he really tried to carry out national security responsibilities in a very appropriate manner and tried to not just, bring politics into it. Again, I think that SSCI report, the Mueller investigation, the Durham investigation and review, all of this, I think, again, validates what happened in terms of Russian interference, the conclusions of that assessment, that Russia tried to interfere to enhance Donald Trump's prospects in that election, to damage Hillary Clinton, and to undermine the integrity of our election process. Those have really stood up and have been validated and supported by subsequent reviews, very thorough reviews. So again, this is something that I think is made up out of, unfortunately, whole cloth, and they're just trying to see what they're able to get to stick to the media wall, and how some of these outlets are now taking this, and especially John Ratcliffe's comments that he had on X and the other things, they're so inconsistent with the CIA note. He's making these allegations that just have no evidentiary basis whatsoever. And again, I think it's beneath the dignity of a CIA director to do things like that.
Okay. Was that the clip you're talking about mostly, Penny? He was very fidgety and whatnot. What's interesting is it's John Brennan's own meeting notes from that meeting with Obama and Biden and Comey, where he actually wrote it down, the Clinton plan. Those are Brennan's notes. And you talk about Russia interfering in the election. Okay, that is such a half truth. Okay. That is so deceptive, because what the FBI concluded is that Russia always meddles in the election from the standpoint of social media and otherwise in the last however long it's been since social media was effective. And they do so by putting stories out, okay, to anger one side or the other. And they do it with both sides, okay? And the FBI didn't find anything in that investigation. I read the report back in when would this have been? 2017, 2016. 2016, I want to say in July, August-ish of 2016. The report came out on a Sunday morning. I remember reading all the way through it before going to church. And I was astounded because I thought, oh my gosh, they're saying this. This has to be like a smoking gun. What is going on with Trump and Russia? I read through it, and it is a huge nothing burger, as in Russia always does this. But yet they don't say that. They don't say that they found Russia doing things on social media and trying to peddle false narratives through various posts and things like that. Historically, they've done that for a long time, and they do it for both sides to try to spread misinformation and division. That's what they do. So Brennan is leaving all of that out when he talks about this, by the way. But backing up, the reason why this is so important, even though Jenna Arnold there said, basically, I think she was making the point of, why do we need to look in the past versus the future kind of thing. I would argue, and what I was hoping I would give it a chance to say is, they hijacked our country for 3 years with this Russia collusion hoax. They hijacked our country. It was all over the media, everywhere you looked. It was all the people on the left were talking about in Congress over and over. We are never going to get that time back, not to mention they were handicapping the president from carrying out the agenda that the American people voted him in to perform and carry out. They hijacked that. It was complete distraction. We are never going to get that time back. Accountability needs to happen. Here's the other thing. Those people were in the room. Obama, Biden, Comey, Brennan. They knew that there was no Russia collusion, but they had enough curiosity from this Steele dossier that Clinton paid for. And by the way, she allocated it into the wrong category from an accounting standpoint with her campaign, and she got a $125,000 fine by the FEC. They never, ever did that to Trump based on the Stormy Daniels thing. The FEC saw it. And if it was deemed a campaign expense, it would have been a violation, which is why Hillary Clinton got in trouble for paying for the Steele dossier. If that legal fee that was paid out of the campaign coffers, it would have been a violation. So it was basically, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't on that, by the way. But anyway, Clinton did get in trouble with it. She had to pay a $125,000 fine. You probably never heard that. Look it up if you haven't. It's true. And so those guys in that meeting knew she paid for it. They basically used that Steele dossier as the justification to go, well, there's nothing here, but we should look anyway. And that's how the FISA warrants read. That's how the Durham report reads, where it's literal agents were like, we don't have probable cause here. Didn't matter. Continue. We're going to find something eventually. Did they? No. But they all knew it was a ruse. And they let the American people suffer It could have been cleared up by John Brennan, James Comey, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden. Did they ever come out and say, no, we've seen it, there's nothing here? No, of course they didn't. They let us suffer. They stood by and watched it happen. That's why accountability needs to happen. Okay, so mostly Penny is saying there is a separate clip of Brennan.
I want to bring in NBC's Ken.
I'm going to 518. He says go to 518. 518 when it shows a clip of him talking and shaking from another MSNBC.
How Gen X are getting their teenage bodies back.
Okay, I don't need to know that. Thank you for the ad, though.
How parts of the intelligence community and the Justice Department have been politicized.
If you want to see
how Gen X are getting their
Really? You're going to make me watch another ad? If you want to see what we're showing you on the screen, come over to X or Rumble by clicking the link in the bio. Seriously.
Listen to John Brennan.
It is hard to believe that here we are 8.5 years afterward, we're still going over this ground that has been, I think, fairly well and exhaustively plowed. And I think this is, unfortunately, a very sad and tragic example of the continued politicization of the intelligence community, of the national security process. And quite frankly, I'm really shocked that, individuals who are willing to sacrifice their reputations, their credibility, their decency to continue to do Donald Trump's bidding on something that clearly is just politically based.
Okay, I think that was part of the clip we showed. Thank you, mostly Penny. So Brennan, fidgety, and he just looked uncomfortable, didn't he? So anyway, we'll see what happens with that. The real question is, we have a DOJ that is letting us down. I'm just going to say it. Pam Bondi is letting us down. So I would say historical wisdom would caution, don't get your hopes up. I think that's probably a good caution to bring into this. During that, excuse me, during that cabinet meeting, Pam Bondi responds to why a minute was missing. But first, President Trump interrupted and was not happy about the question.
Sure. Your memo and release yesterday on Jeffrey Epstein, it left some lingering mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for a American or foreign intelligence agency. The former labor secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of his death?
Yeah, sure. Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
Sure.
All right, what do you think about President Trump jumping in like that? I was shocked, honestly. 99 times out of 100, President Trump is very in tune with what matters to the American people. And basically he's saying it's not a big deal. Why are you still talking about this? Now, some say it's misdirection. Well, he's trying to talk about it and get, people riled up to where, everybody's calling for the release. And I've seen many takes like this online saying, this is a long-term strategy. It could be, but I'm just going to handle it on the surface of what it looks like. And what it looks like is Trump is tired of talking about it and doesn't think it's that big of a deal. Well, I got to tell you, this is a huge deal. Huge deal. especially on the right. You don't hear a whole lot of people speaking out about it, especially in politics. You got like 2 or 3 Republicans that have said anything, no Democrats. It's like nobody wants it out there. But let me tell you, when it comes to the actual American people, the people on the right are absolutely dumbfounded at this response. And like I said, President Trump is very in tune with what the American people want. This has been talked about. He's been asked about it. People on his staff have been asked about it. Kash Patel has come out and said, there's a black book somewhere in the FBI. The FBI has it. And so this is whiplash. This is whiplash. And here's the problem with it, okay? It's very likely these people are very much in the know. They know something. President Trump knows something. Pam Bondi knows something. And it may be that it's all destroyed. But the mistake that they are making is we were all reading from page 1 for the past few months. Okay, as in the Epstein files, here they are. Oh, wait, that's actually not them. We're going through the real stuff that the field office in New York had. We're going through, I mean, if nothing else, you can tell, I definitively state that Pam Bondi has botched the communication on this. When she did the influencer thing, I hated it. It was so gimmicky. I said it at the time. I don't like it. Because it looks like she didn't actually look at what was in the files versus what had already been released, okay? And then it's like, we're going through it, it's coming out, and then it's like, there's nothing there. Why are you asking about this? Like, that is freaking weird. So we were all reading from page 1, as in, the files are coming. Don't worry, the files are coming. And now Trump, Pam Bondi, and others are reading from page 5. And so we're sitting here going, wait a minute, what happened on page 2, 3, and 4 of this saga? They very well may have a legitimate way or reason to be talking like this about it because they know something. But we don't know. There's a huge gap in the communication line and information stream that we don't have. And I find it really strange when they jump to that place and act like it's out of touch or beating a dead horse to ask about it. They have a duty to tell us. They don't have to disclose information. They could say, we looked at it. A lot of the information is gone. We don't know where it is at this point. Or they could say, we reviewed everything, and Epstein is the only person that was involved in any of these people, and the things that you've heard from Virginia Giuffre, or whatever her name is, and all these other people, and this and this and this, and oh, here's how Epstein actually made his money. If they filled in the gaps, then we would say, okay, I don't like the answer, but I at least understand it. You have a duty to fill in that vacuum in between. So where is it? And, I know some people out there are saying this is on purpose. Trump is strategic. I got to tell you, my observation here is this was a very organic, knee-jerk, irritated reaction from Trump. I think if Trump was being strategic, the answer would have been different. It would have been something like, we've given you everything that we can, that we found. There's nothing more to look at here. And, if other people have information, they should come forward. But we've given you everything we know. Instead, it's, why are you asking that question? So maybe you could say that was the strategy behind it. I just find it really odd. I find it inconsistent, actually, with Trump's normal way of strategery. And so that's my perspective. It doesn't have to be yours. I tend to believe Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is typically it. But in this case, I don't see how you can say that it was only Epstein that was involved. Like, that is so different than what we've been told. It could be true. I find it very hard to believe. It could be true. And if it is, you have an obligation to explain. See what I mean? I'm just going to tell it like it is. If Biden did this, we would be pissed off to no end. We would be freaking out. We would be screaming and yelling and beside ourselves. Remember what I said the other day. Even if you love Donald Trump, politician, any leader, it is still the responsibility of the American people to hold them to account. And I would say you have an obligation to explain yourself. An obligation, a duty, a requirement. Remember, these people work for us. And again, I like President Trump. This is not me saying, I voted for Trump, but I'm so disappointed I won't support him anymore. No, it's just like, don't put your faith in these people because at some point they're going to let you down. But I'm not going to sit here and try to polish it and say, oh, yeah, this is perfect. This is great. President Trump knew what he was doing there. No, I don't buy that. Because even if this is strategy, okay, and certainly it's possible, even if it's strategy, you have an obligation to explain more than they did to the American people. That's my point. Meanwhile, you could say it's strategy, and I'm telling you, without a doubt, this is causing an implosion for support for President Trump and this administration. It is a huge black eye right now. Now, they could come out next week and totally redeem themselves by saying, here's why. Is that a possibility? Certainly. But I'm telling you, right now, this is cancerous. It's cancerous on the right. And I don't know how long you want to let that cancer grow, but if you let it go too long, it's going to be, I don't want to say fatal because that makes it sound like this administration will be a failure. No, far from it. This administration has been historically successful already. But when it comes to credibility, this could be fatal from a credibility standpoint. Not from an effectiveness standpoint, not from a historically relevant standpoint, but certainly it is not a small issue. Does this affect your daily life? No. Does this improve the price of eggs? No. Does this help us with trade in other countries? No. Does this help mortgage rates go down? No. Does this blah, blah, blah? It doesn't do anything. So you could say from a policy standpoint, this is irrelevant. But I would push back and say, don't underestimate how relevant this is to transparency and trust in the government, which is already at a huge low. To release this and have information that clears things up would bolster, would surge credibility and trust. It'd be a huge win. And you go, well, of course. So why wouldn't they release it if they could win so much from it? Great question. And I think the connections to intelligence are why. Right now, the best theory I have going is there is too much leverage and too much from a national security standpoint, global security standpoint, that would be compromised with the release of this information. The whole tone has changed on this. From President Trump to Pam Bondi and others, the whole tone, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, the entire tone has changed. Now, if that information was destroyed, there has to be some evidence that it was destroyed. Just tell us that. But the whole tone has changed, and it's whiplash. That's why I'm saying fill in the gap at least a little bit. If it's national security, global security, et cetera, at least that would make sense. Right now, nothing is making sense. And that is not the way it typically is done inside the Trump administration. So something is starkly different than the usual, MO. All right. Thank you to Star, $10 contribution on the board via Cash App. Thank you very much, Star. And that is our one and only contribution. So thank you, Star. $10. You can do so via Cash App or Venmo at IkeReport.com. I'm sure I'm not going to give very many contributions today. Anytime I am critical of Trump, it just pisses people off. I'm sorry. If you, this is not the Trump campaign. Okay. I want truth and accountability and transparency, and I want justice. I want accountability. That's what I want. That's it. And if that makes you hate me, if that makes you not want to give and you don't watch anymore, okay. That's your choice. But I am the one that has to have a conscience about what I say and don't say on this show. And if I don't call balls and strikes as I see them and point out that if Biden did this, we'd be freaking out like crazy. Like, I have to. It doesn't mean that this can't be redeemed, okay? It doesn't mean that this can't be resolved. And a week from now, something can happen, and I could say, all right, I was skeptical. I didn't like it. It actually kind of irritated me. But now I see it. And that could certainly happen. But I'm just telling you right here at this moment, this is a very destructive way to handle this. That's my point. I don't like it. All right. Do you want to see what Pam Bondi actually said about that missing 1 minute of video?
First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said, I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent.
Hold the freaking phone. Never going to be released, never going to happen. Whoa, 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 whoa. That is the exact opposite of what you said 2 months ago. So my perception of Pam Bondi right now is she either is lying to us now or she lied to us before, because this is completely different. And the most optimistic thing I could say about this is that Pam Bondi was talking out of her butthole. Pardon the expression, because it stinks. Because she was saying things about the files publicly, and she wasn't looking at them. She hadn't looked at them. Like, that's the most optimistic way I can present Pam Bondi's handling of this. Is she was saying things, but she hadn't looked at them. And I am very, like, I tend to think this more than anything because of the way that she handled the rollout to those influencers, releasing files to them in binders, not realizing that those same files had already been released, some even more so less redacted. And so when she's like, oh, we're going to release them, and it's a lot of files, and we're going through them, it's a truckload. It's a truckload. Again, I think she talks like a beauty pageant contestant. Okay. I was willing to give her the benefit of the doubt, but I told you I was not sure about her from the beginning. Of all the cabinet picks, Pam Bondi is one that I'm not sure about. Now, can I take a little moment to piss you guys off even more? Let's talk about Matt Gaetz. He was supposed to be the guy, and everyone's like, oh, there's a bigger plan with Matt Gaetz. Well, how's that looking right about now? He's an OAN host, and he's not doing anything. Where was the Trump Matt Gaetz statement of, oh, we got something big coming? What happened to that? Are we still waiting for that? I mean, how long? When's the statute of limitations? Anyway, I don't think this would have happened with Matt Gaetz, is my point with Pam Bondi. She was saying one thing, and there's no way she could have been actually looking at the files and be trustworthy from the standpoint of credibility to be believed, because she released the influencer files and she hadn't actually looked at them to realize they'd already been released. So that was a big nothing burger. And then it's, oh, I found out they're holding them and then it's, oh, we're reviewing them. They're coming soon. They're on my desk. And now it's, oh, they're never going to see the light of, like, wait a minute. Again, you went from point A to point D. Where's B and C? Where are they? I absolutely despise it. You ever talk to somebody, like, you have an understanding about something you're going to do, and then the next time you talk to them, it's as if you never had that conversation, and now, no, we're going in this direction. Whoa. Like, that drives me crazy. At least explain to me what changed between when we talked 3 days ago. And now you're just acting like we're going in this direction and you haven't filled in the gap. I understand when things are moving quickly, it's hard to do. But when you're in front of the American people and you've been promising this huge thing, you got to fill in the gaps for us, Pam. Acting like it's just absurd to expect the release of some information is insulting.
Jeffrey Epstein, child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him,
nobody wants to see child porn. Nobody, except for weirdos, but nobody that's really asking for these files is interested in that. Okay? Why are you making it about that?
being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And
I have no knowledge of that. It's in the freaking file from his plea deal in her state of Florida with Acosta spelling it out. He was told to back off because Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence. I don't know anything about that. BS. Stop lying to us. And if she doesn't actually know that, then what in the hell is she doing in this position? Please, someone explain this to me. I'm going crazy here. I digress.
missing from the video. We released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was on that, there was a minute that was off the counter. And what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999. So every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing. So we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every night. And that's it on Epstein.
That's it, huh? Okay, that's it. Did you notice how everybody was looking at her like they had never heard this before, President Trump included? I mean, one, I think, reasonable theory is that President Trump trusts Pam Bondi and she is lying to him. Okay, if you want to take this out from the standpoint of President Trump is not doing anything nefarious, I would look at it like that as a possibility. The Pam Bondi is not being truthful with President Trump. So what about Pam Bondi? And I see people, Pam Bondi's great. Pam Bondi's a letdown. I see it. I mean, everybody's all over the place on Pam Bondi. It takes time. Give it time. I think that period is over. I think it's over. Now, I want you to take a look at this clip. I'll show you as much as I can of Glenn Beck talking about, with his staff, the video that they showed us. Okay, and sort of the contradictions here.
Is if the jump in the tape wasn't incompetent enough for you, listen to this one. Jason is here with us. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Glenn. What a morning. Wow.
Mm-hmm. What a morning it is. Okay, so Jason, what else have you found?
Okay, so the more and more we looked at this tape, I started looking. It was just weird because it looked like a janitor's closet. So door
Stop with the
46.
janitor's closet.
And you were like, shut up. This is not a janitor's closet. I don't know what this is. Well, I was like, I could tell you there's a woman that looks like a janitor that comes out of supposedly the person, there's this cell that they're saying is his cell, which they're not, by the way. This was like people on social media were saying this was the cell. This coming out with a trash can. So I looked around to see if there was any confirmation on what this cell was. And I found an OIG report from the Justice Department 2 years ago that shows the camera angle and the one camera that was actually working. So you can see the diagram, and I think we actually have it if you're watching this right now. There's a diagram that shows where this camera is. It shows where Epstein's cell is. And the big thing that stands out, Glenn, is this camera doesn't even have eyes on Epstein's cell at all. Like, not at all.
That's incredible.
4 different wings here. There is a service wing, and that's what we're looking at with that door 46. That's like a service entrance or staff entrance. Now, you can't see on the lower level Epstein cell at all. So this is what makes it look even crazier for that 1 minute that's missing. And I will say that, let me just say it this way. I've spent years and years and years looking at surveillance and security camera footage, as you know, in my previous job. I've never seen an over 1 minute jump right at a time that would be very, very, I don't know, just convenient. I've never seen that before in all my years looking at these things.
There's no reason. Why do you say that minute would be convenient? You're just saying that 1 minute being gone is convenient. You're not saying that particular minute
it's
is
convenient
important. We don't
in this entire time frame based off of this camera angle. So it's convenient, like, let's say 60 seconds would be great for someone walking across that lower level. 60 seconds would be perfect for if you wanted to like conceal the fact that someone walked across that area. That's why it would be convenient.
Here's why I didn't buy into this at first. Okay. 60 seconds to get in and open the door and then kill him and then leave. Okay. But look at the diagram. If you look at the diagram where the camera is, there is maybe a foot space where the camera is not able to see where there is a door from the staff area. Okay.
Are you looking at, because I think it's hard to tell from this, are we looking at, is this diagram the top floor or the bottom floor? Jason, do you have any idea?
So it looks like Epstein. So I think Epstein's cell is on the top floor. Yeah. So the stairs would
These
be
are the upper floors, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm looking at where the staff area is. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
See the yellow triangle.
Yes.
And the red box where it's his cell. Okay. So there is one way out of the staff area, and it's right below the camera,
like underneath the floor, essentially, of where the camera is.
Yeah, on the floor. If the camera's up on a ceiling, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the camera is
from above,
from
on the
second
ceiling.
Floor, shooting down, and you can what the evidence that they're basically proclaiming here, and this is true. You know what Jason's saying is true, that you can't see the door of the Epstein cell. What you can see is a common area that, in theory, you would need to cross to get to the cell.
All right, so I know it's a little confusing, but the allegation is that this camera is on a second floor, but Epstein's cell was actually on the first floor, is my understanding. And so to say that this is definitive when Epstein's cell is downstairs and around the corner here from the view, how can you definitively say that no one entered his cell? And then you have the minute missing. So it just doesn't look good. Again, on the surface, what I want to think here is that Kash Patel and Dan Bongino knew enough before they got in to say there's something wrong here and had enough contacts in the FBI to where they knew certain things. When they got in, none of that stuff was there. So it sure seems like they were handed an untenable, impossible situation, okay? That's what it seems like to me. That's kind of where I'm going in my thought process here is it's not their fault. They were sort of stuck into this botched situation. The problem I have is that they're now definitively saying there's no other possibility. He killed himself. There's no other possibility. And Pam Bondi saying there's nothing there. We're never going to release this. Like, that's the problem I have. Like, I don't think they messed anything up or they did anything malicious to destroy evidence or anything like that. It's the communication now is there's no possibility. That's what's weird. That's what's weird to me. I don't know about you. $5 on the board. David Sling says, no sweat. Everyone feels like this. Appreciate the $5 there. Angel Gen X says, you're just telling the truth with a $5 contribution. I am not a fan of what Trump and Bondi are doing right now. They seem very defensive and dismissive of us still wanting to know. No one ever asked to see the videos, by the way. Oh, that's true. Right. Thank you very much, David Sling and Angel Gen X, for your contribution. See, people still do give, even though I say negative things. Free thinkers. You got to detach. You got to detach and just look at it objectively here, right? Another theory here is they don't want to be the ones who release it. What would you do to get it released without being the one responsible for its release? You piss enough people off, make it look like you are hiding something. Everybody calls for it and subpoenas it and releases it. I mean, you could get someone else to release it. My question, though, David Sling, would be, why don't you want to be the one to release it? Because of the implications of security and things like that? I don't know, because I would weigh the negative implication possibilities versus the destructive possibilities of not releasing it, and just the appearance of negativity toward you, and also the huge win, like historical win it would be for Trump and his team to release this, because it's like they all said it couldn't be done. This proves that President Trump and these others are not part of, any of this deep state stuff, which I don't think he is. But this would sort of shut a lot of people up in that realm. So to me, the benefits, easy for me to say, right? The benefits far outweigh the negatives when it comes to releasing it. But again, there could be more to it. I would say if there is something other than what is evident or what is, obvious, if there's something more going on, the timeline is very short. In other words, they've got to do something soon. This can't be done 6 months from now. I'm just telling you, the butthurt over this, the distrust over it, is just going to grow and fester. Would be my point of view on it. Rocky says maybe Trump wanted the big, beautiful bill passed, and the only way to get some of the people to vote yes was to say they wouldn't release it. Anything's possible. I don't see Trump negotiating in that way from a position of weakness. Let's see here. What else are you guys saying? Pam says accountability comes first before anything else. Rocky says this will impact JD in 2028 if they don't release it. Pam says they knew Matt Gaetz would have blown it all open. So the people who knew he would made it possible he wouldn't be in the position. There was certainly a lot of pushback from a lot of the deep state against Matt Gaetz. Tata Sue says, I would rather have Matt Gaetz, and that Pam Bondi was a big disappointment. Mostly Penny says, you could have taken the faces of the adults in the videos and plastered them all over the internet with the disgusting creeps. So we, the people, can dole out some justice. Yeah, you could do it without releasing the videos. That's why, again, it doesn't make sense. Like I said, this is the result of some of this for a lot of people right now. Could it change? Yes. But Tata Sue says, what a disaster. I'm done voting. I've heard this from multiple people. I've got to say, that's what I'm saying. Are the files going to change your life? No. But you can't underestimate the importance of these files. David Sling says it could cause revolutions in other countries. It could, which is why a lot of people wouldn't want them released. Mostly Penny, the longer you wait, the longer you're implicated. All right. Thank you for those comments. Thank you for the support out there. If you want to support via Cash App or Venmo at IkeReport.com or in the chat on Rumble. All right. I did not intend on spending this much time. Here's a wild guess from Patrick Bet David. He says Trump is using Epstein's client list as leverage over the deep state and other powerful world leaders to get things done. Trump mastered this game a long time ago. I would say that's possible, but they shouldn't have told us and communicated the way they did prior to, creating a huge letdown. Elon Musk says the release of the Epstein files will be high on the America Party's list of priorities. So Elon Musk, an opportunist, seizing on this and using it for this America Party. This is Virginia Giffey. I don't remember how to say her name. Remember, she died. I used to be watched by, this is from her diary on Zero Hedge. Quote, I used to be watched by Epstein's hidden cameras, which I have seen myself. The FBI have the archive footage showing me being abused by other men, used as blackmail. Right there in her diary. So was Virginia Giffey lying in her own diary? And she ended up saying, I'm not suicidal, but she died kind of mysteriously. And she says other men, not one other guy, Andrew, Prince Andrew, other men. So how is it that Epstein is the only one involved? And you remember Kash Patel told Glenn Beck before he became the FBI director that there was a little black book and that it was in the possession of the FBI.
So who has Jeffrey Epstein's
Black book?
black book?
FBI.
But who? That is I mean, there's
that's under direct control of the director of the FBI.
Okay. Which he is now the director of the FBI. So did it disappear? I mean, wouldn't it be better to come out and say, we were wrong? We were talking all this crap before we got in, and we were wrong. That would be better than what they're saying. Yeah, it would look bad on credibility, but not as bad as it looks right now. Why not just say that? Or say, it's supposed to be here. It's not. Someone did something with it. Again, all of the communication. Oh, we've got the files. We're going to release. Oh, yeah, get ready. That's the problem. They set us up for destroying and shattering expectations. Now, Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, is reporting that the DOJ and FBI are still in the process of locating and reviewing Jeffrey Epstein-related records as part of their ongoing lawsuit. Judicial Watch is suing for these files and has been for some time. Quote, they're sending out contradictory messages telling the American people that no Epstein material will be released while telling the federal court that the Epstein FOIA review is proceeding. So what's going on here? Now, one theory is they're letting people feel comfortable, thinking it's not going to be released. Meanwhile, they're working behind the scenes. It's possible. But again, all of the criticism I'm giving you is not irrelevant in that sense, is the way it was communicated and the way it's being communicated now. I mean, you could have strung this along for a long time and said, we're still reviewing. It's just taking a lot longer while you're still doing all this. So they're coming out and literally they leak the memo to Axios. That's how Pam Bondi did it. It's so freaking weird. All right. And so the theories are that the whole reason why they're not doing this is there's tons of blackmail material on here. And, a big part of, espionage or intelligence is having blackmail leverage.
Blackmail plays an integral role. And I've been at this for 21 years, and Epstein had cameras in all of his homes. I mean, Epstein was definitely a blackmail artist. And the government wants to make sure that does not come out, that a huge part of our political system is predicated on blackmail. And especially if that dark, malignant corner of the intelligence that is using blackmail against our politicians and other people, if they were using children, I mean, that would make the American people erupt. So that's why that Wikipedia page is locked down. And that's why this is important. This is, for that dark corner of intelligence, this is Omaha Beach. They're not going to give an inch because this is the last thing that they want out. And it's amazing how the Epstein scandal has been covered up.
Okay. So you talk about the blackmail and what's used in blackmail would anger the American people. Understandably. You don't want to release that. Okay. You don't want to expose how we get things done, how nasty it is. Okay. Then don't tell us you're going to release them. Just don't freaking pee on us and tell us it's raining. Level with us. I think people could handle this. They can't handle being lied to. Now, Bill O'Reilly says that Trump told him the rationale for not releasing the Epstein files. That's what he said on News Nation. That Trump told him why. I don't know about Bill O'Reilly, but he has a story to tell. Take a look.
I talked to President Trump man to man, eye to eye on St. Patrick's Day about this and the Kennedy files and the King files. It was all one conversation. And he said, and I agree, there are a lot of names associated with Epstein that had nothing to do with Epstein's conduct. They maybe had lunch with him or maybe had some correspondence for one thing or another. If that name gets out, those people are destroyed because there's not going to be any context. Media doesn't care about context. So you can't do that. You can't destroy human beings by putting out the files.
Okay. Yes and no. We're not talking about what's in the investigative file completely. We're talking about the client list specifically. That's what we're talking about. Bill, knowing Bill, he's probably on that list with, a note, likes loofahs. You remember that? Caught on tape about a loofah being shoved up somewhere. Remember that? Anyway, that doesn't hold water for me. Anyway, let's see. Yeah. So we got more on this. I'm trying to move forward. Ben Shapiro. Okay. Ben Shapiro is saying there's no interest in here as far as, what the polls are saying. Okay. This is what Ben Shapiro is saying.
However, when President Trump speaks for the American people more generally, and he says, guys, don't we have better things to do? You can understand his irritation. The man is trying to negotiate an end to a war in the Gaza Strip. He's trying to negotiate an end to a war in Ukraine. He's attempting to revivify the American economy. He's attempting to crack down on illegal immigration. On a list of American priorities by the polls, the Epstein-Maxwell case comes in pretty close to zero, just on a list of priorities.
Okay. That's just not true. That's just not true. And if you were trying to, sort of play this down and diminish its importance, that's kind of interesting. It's not that big of a deal. People aren't really that worried about it. Huh. That's weird because there's a lot of allegations of Jeffrey Epstein being an agent of Mossad, of Israeli intelligence. Gee, who is it that's been unabashedly defensive of Israel? Well, it's been Ben Shapiro. Doggone it. By the way, these aren't things you can say on mainstream or cable news or even right-wing outlets or even right-wing independent operators. Now, again, I'm not going all Candace Owens, but I'm saying, how can you believe what Ben Shapiro's saying? He's compromised. And I don't mean from the standpoint of he's an agent of Mossad. I just say he has personal interests that would be at odds with the exposure of Jeffrey Epstein as a Mossad agent. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. People don't really care about. Well, the facts beg to differ. Mark Mitchell, who's with Rasmussen, who has been saying that Donald Trump's approval rating has been about to break the model. Historically, his approvals, his positives in the numbers consistently, and they poll every day, have been historic. His statement, I really thought Trump 2.0 was going to break the polling mold because it's unprecedented. He says it still might, but this week hurt. Trump's approvals have tanked this week. People are really pissed. Okay? It doesn't mean he can't totally redeem himself. Okay? I'm just telling you where it's at right now. This is an important matter. It isn't nearly zero, as Ben Shapiro says. It's not good. So you got approval and disapproval, okay? And the disapprovals this week are going down and continue to do so as far as disapprovals. You got approval and disapproval. Just this approval index, it's not good. So this is something that has to be dealt with. Whether you think it's important or not, the American people absolutely think it was important. And speaking of polls, Thomas Massey did a informal poll with 131,000 voters on X with the question, was Jeffrey Epstein an asset of a government intelligence agency? 94% of people said yes. I mean, this isn't a mystery. It was literally in the case file in that plea deal that he did in Florida. All right. I'm going to get your comments one more time before I move on from Epstein. Mostly Penny says Ben Shapiro is mentally diminished. Friends of God says, what kind of character would be of interest just for lunch with Epstein? I got to say, this guy was in a lot of circles. I mean, RFK Jr. rode on his plane with his family back in the early 90s. Like, he was in circles offering up this plane, offering up favors, and he was, giving to charity and at a bunch of stuff before anybody knew this about him, allegedly. So because of the circles he ran in and however he made his money, people would come in contact with him. I'm just telling you, if you're in any kind of political sphere or any kind of power sphere, you come in contact with people all the time, or like, hey, I'd like to take you to lunch. I've got an opportunity or whatever. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. And this guy was very persistent. And so I don't actually look at anyone with, they have a problem with discernment of character by being in the same place as this guy. If they went to his island, that's a different story. If they hung out with him after 2008, 2009, that's a different story. Because then it was evident who he was. Mostly Penny says it's pretty telling that most of the accused have not filed defamation suits. Let's see here. Mostly Penny says they'll release everything, but behind a paywall. You want to make some money real fast. Pam says, I heard that the FBI could not take the files from his New York home because of his lawyers. Well, what was interesting is they executed a warrant and they didn't take everything, allegedly. And then they went back and a lot of stuff was gone. Allegedly. Here's $1 million comment today. I'm not quite sure why Ike isn't more popular. I love your common sense point of view. I mean, Tata, you're speaking my language. You are touting the question I ask myself every day. Probably because there's just too much common sense on this show for the comfortability of people that want to control things. But I appreciate the comment. All right, let's move on quickly to some others. We have a hard stop before the top of the hour to make way for the next show coming up on the Died Suddenly X feed. So Secretary Brooke Rollins, there will be no amnesty. Obviously, she's been the one
there will be no amnesty.
Who's been in the ear of President Trump regarding farm workers. So I think we're talking semantics here. No amnesty, but there's going to be some kind of carve out for these people to stay, which I honestly think is the only way you don't gut certain industries, at least in the near term. Now, if you do deport every single person here illegally, despite the ones that have been here long-term paying taxes and not getting into trouble, if you gut them all, you basically have to ask these industries to go bankrupt or greatly suffer for a long period of time until you can, apply the, be able to build up the workforce effectively. So President Trump does not want to create a huge economic problem for growth in the near term, understandably. And I think as much as I hate not being able to have a black and white approach to this and say, if you're here illegally, no matter what, no matter how long you've been here, you're gone. As much as I want that to be the approach, unfortunately, because of bad decisions for years prior, I don't think that is a practical possibility without killing the economy in certain sectors. Okay. So Brooke Rollins says no amnesty.
The mass deportations continue, but in a strategic way, and we move the workforce towards automation and 100% American participation, which again, with 34 million people, bodied adults on Medicaid, we should be able to do that fairly quickly.
Okay. So I think what we're talking about here is she's talking about automation and things like that. These industries essentially need time. And so you could end up deporting everyone. It's not going to happen during Trump's term here. It's just not. It's impossible. Statistically speaking, there's no way to do it. But what you could do is, like she said, be very strategic, very specific, and getting out all the criminals just without a question. Okay. Then you start whittling that down, and all while giving time for these industries to pivot to other ways of doing it. That's a big part of it. You may eventually end up deporting every single illegal immigrant. That's possible, but that is a 10-year process probably. So that means whoever comes after Trump has to have the same political will and motivation and ability to do it. And so I would say they should work in that direction to the extent they can. But as time goes on, you flesh out the numbers of what we're looking at. And if you get to a point where it's like, actually, the people that are remaining here have been here for 10 years. They paid their taxes. They've never been in trouble. Let's give them a path to a reduced category of citizenship where they can't vote. They're basically, I would say, you could have them as a special worker status visa, or one thing I've been thinking about here is, what if you just treated them like a felon where they can't vote and there's certain things they cannot do? Anyway, I don't know what that is. I would say the way that they're going about it, though, right now is the correct way, and that is take the low-hanging fruit out, no matter who's picking it. If they're a criminal, get them out, and then continue in that direction while allowing time for industries to pivot to automation, to bringing in American-born workers, and go from there. Trump also reiterated this point in the cabinet meeting where he also said, we're not talking about amnesty.
Toward an American workforce. So all of the
We've got
above.
to give the farmers the people they need, but we're not talking amnesty.
Got to give farmers the workers that they need, but we are not talking amnesty. And when you look at the jobs, actually, American-born jobs continue to surge. 2 million jobs for American-born workers since Trump took office.
President Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration seems to be showing up in the jobs data. It's a point that the White House is making. Here's what they said about the latest jobs report. It shows that American-born workers have accounted for all of the job gains since President Trump took office, and wages continue to rise. So here are the numbers that they're talking about. Foreign-born employment has fallen by 543,000 since January, when President Trump took office. Native-born or U.S.-born jobs have increased by more than 2 million since the month Trump started his second term.
All right, so foreign-born jobs, workers have lost 543,000 jobs, while native-born Americans have gained 2 million jobs just since Trump took office. So it is working. The transition is happening. It's just going to take some more time. You also can't underestimate the self-deportations that are happening. Now, that would be a game changer. If you had self-deportations happening at high enough levels, and you could argue someone who's been here for 10 years, never broken the law, and has paid their taxes, if they're being smart, they should self-deport and come back in the right way long term. That's really what they should do. The problem would be, okay, just realistically, if a lot of people did that, it's going to leave industries without people to do work, at least temporarily. Okay, so you just, if you're okay with that outcome, then that's fine. But if it's going to be extremely destructive and detrimental, I can understand why some people don't want that to happen. But that's really what should happen. If we're talking about people that are of the right mindset, the kind of people we want in America, and they're hardworking, they pay their taxes, and they've never been in trouble with the law, self-deport, come back in the right way. If you get deported, though, you can never come back legally. So you can't underestimate the self-deportation possibilities here, which is, very efficient and doesn't cost us money. So that would be the way to go. We're talking about cracking down on Chinese-owned farmland. Now the Department of Defense is involved. Pete Hegseth commenting on that. It happens at least once a show where we just get the spinny wheel for no apparent reason.
Who owns the land around our bases and strategic bases, and getting an understanding of why foreign entities, foreign companies, foreign individuals might be buying up land around those bases. That's something I should be paying attention to on behalf of the American people, on behalf of my department, and on behalf of the president. It's common sense. And so food security, just like energy resilience, just like where we get our water, that's all national security, especially in a contingency. So we would be asleep at the wheel if we were not fully a party to an effort like this to ensure that our nation had the food supply it needs. But specifically, our troops have what they need on our bases, so that in those moments, you can rely on us here in the United States to provide that security. So,
all right, so it's good that is a priority of the DoD now as well. Bree says, I think this can be done, but it needs to be done strategically. Mostly Penny says, is it possible that you are too handsome for fame? I think that's probably it. I think you hit the nail on the head, Mostly Penny. That is why I haven't landed a huge media contract. It's just the handsomeness. That's got to be it. Couldn't be anything else. Friends of God on X says, this is stuff we know about. Let's hear about stuff we need to examine. Well, I'm sorry, friends of God, that this is not the content that challenges you. This is not Alex Jones, so I'm sorry, but this is, you can't please everybody, and that's okay. I don't know what you want to examine, but I'm trying to keep people informed and give a common sense take on it. The majority of the insurgents involved in the ICE terror plot from Dallas were transgender, according to A Muse. There was this plot where they sabotaged these ICE agents. They camped out, and according to A Muse, believes that some of these are not who they appear to be. And this happened in Texas, this ICE agent sabotage. So be on the lookout. These kind of things are happening more and more. On the homeland front, Sarah Adams says that the government is letting Al-Qaeda attack our homeland. Basically, the revocation of the foreign terrorist designation for Al-Nusra Front, the Al-Nusra Front, also known as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. So the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has said these guys are not terrorists now. Sarah Adams says they're Al-Qaeda and says they're going to attack our homeland, so be prepared. She's been saying this for a while. Again, not, a little bit of an alarmist, I think, on some fronts, but at the same time, she does know a lot. So take it for what you will. A funny moment, interesting moment, not surprising. This Subway Takes podcast, the host said that he conducted, I can't remember this guy's name, but he conducted an interview of Kamala Harris, and it was so bad they both decided it's too bad to air during the campaign.
He emailed me.
They emailed, like an email from the
DNC.
Okay.
And they said, hey, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are really interested in being on your show. I said, that sounds cool.
Okay.
I'll at least get to tell my daughter that I met the potential president of the United States.
Yeah.
And so I said yes, based on the fact that it would be a good story. And also they both had good takes.
What happened with Kamala?
Her take was really confusing and weird and not good. And so mutually agreed that we shouldn't publish it.
I see.
And I got lucky because I didn't want to be blamed for her losing.
Her take was that bad?
It was really, really bad, and it was like didn't make any sense. I can tell you, it was bacon as a spice. Bacon as a spice.
Bacon as a spice.
Bacon as a spice. That's how bad it was. It was such a bad take, they could not air it. That's pretty bad. All right, so you have in New York this turning on Mamdani, and Dean Phillips, former congressman, right? Former representative. Is there room for Mamdani in the Democrat Party? This guy ran for mayor in New York City. He is the Democrat nominee. He has not won the mayor, but he's who Democrats chose.
The current DNC chair, Ken Martin, fellow Minnesotan, used you as an example in saying the party is a big tent. It can welcome people from different ideological, geographic perspectives. I think he used the example of you couldn't win a race in Ilhan Omar's district and she couldn't win a race in yours. Is there room for you and Mamdani in the Democratic Party?
I think it's a fine question. I think it's one that many Republicans have been asking about, whether there's room for traditional conservatives in a party now led by MAGA Republicans like Donald Trump. The answer ultimately, I think, is no. We do share many of the same values. In fact, most Americans share a lot of the same values. But as a political party, yes, you want diversity. You want some differences of opinion, perspective, life story, politics, and experience. But when you have socialists in the Democratic Party, I don't know how anybody could argue that would be beneficial for the party or for the country. Therein lies the great challenge. Same thing on the right, Omar. Is MAGA the future of the Republican Party? If it is, there is going to be a new, grand, successful third party in America, because the overwhelming majority of Americans want neither far left or far right politics. They want decency, they want common sense, competency, and cooperation. And no party right now is elevating candidates who represent those ideals.
I don't know about that on the right. We're so tired of rhinos migrating in the middle that I would say the conservative side has grown. But whatever. Now, this is one of the best explanations of the radical left's obsession with Mamdani, and it's given by our Vice President, J.D. Vance. Take a look.
Now, I may not speak for many of you, but I was once comforted by these contradictions within the modern left. How could privileged whites march around with a straight face decrying white privilege? How could progressives pretend to love conservative Muslims despite those Muslims' views on gender and sexuality? But the answer is obvious if you think about it. And it's a very, very dangerous and very sad answer. The radicals of the far left, they don't need a unifying ideology of what they're for because they know very well what they're against. What unites Islamists, gender studies majors, socially liberal white urbanites, and big pharma lobbyists, it isn't the ideas of Thomas Jefferson or even of Karl Marx. It's hatred. They hate the people in this room. They hate the President of the United States. And most of all, they hate the people who voted for that President of the United States in the last election in November. This is the animating principle of the American far left. Now, to be clear, it isn't true of most of the people who vote for Democrats. Most of the people who vote for Democrats, they're good people struggling to get by, even if we think that they're misguided in their political judgment. But pay close attention to what the leadership of this movement says outside of the glossy campaign ads and outside of the general election tested messaging themes. And it's obvious what animates the leadership of the modern Democratic Party. The far left doesn't care that BLM, the Black Lives Matter movement, led to a spike in violent crime in urban black neighborhoods, and it did, because that same movement also led to anarchy in middle-class white neighborhoods. They do not care that Islamism hates gays and subjugates women because for now, it's a useful tool of death against Americans. And they don't care that too many pharma companies are getting rich from experimental hormonal therapies because in the process, they're destroying the so-called gender binary that has structured social relations between the sexes for the whole of Western civilization. And they certainly don't care that deporting low-wage immigrants will raise the wages of the native-born because they don't mean to create higher living standards for those who are born and raised here, whether they're black, white, or any other skin color. They mean to replace those people with people who will listen to their increasingly bizarre ethnic and religious appeals. They are arsonists, and they will make common cause with anyone willing to light the match. And that's why Mamdani himself is such an appealing instrument to the left. He captures so many of the movement's apparent contradictions in a single human being.
He really does. I mean, literally, his religious beliefs would not allow him to adopt so many of the Democrat standards, the Democrat talking points, the Democrat policy points on LGBTQ and trans and all that. That would completely violate his deep held religious beliefs. Yet he's out there talking about it like it's, and people are just like, yeah, that sounds good. He's an ear tickler, as I've said. In case you aren't aware, let's see. By the way, Tata Sue has a great point. MAGA is not far right. It's actually, I mean, it isn't far right at all. I mean, there's plenty of times some of Trump's policies, I'm like, man, it's maybe, you know, at times tariffs, you know, is a liberal policy. And there are times where it's, you know, he's talking about stuff on the left versus true conservative, which it is totally a contradiction with the left because he has touted some of the things that the left has wanted. And because he's doing them, they're terrible. Now, the vast majority of his stuff is just great for America in general, whether it's left, right, or in the center. But they want to characterize it, as far right wing. All right, before we wrap up here, a couple more things. CEO of weather modification company reveals cloud seeding operations were conducted. Now, I think David Sling said this or was sort of indicating this. It was a great point. Whether it happened, whether it occurred or not. Sorry. whether it affected the storms in Texas or not, we don't know. We can't say definitively. Based on what the CEO says, yeah, we were cloud seeding, but it was too far in advance of when everything went crazy because of that tropical storm coming through to actually have had any effect. But that's really not the major point of this whole thing as far as this story, okay? It's not about whether or not it affected this particular storm. It's the fact that we know on the record, out in the public sphere of understanding, cloud seeding is happening. It is not a conspiracy. It is not a mystery. It is no longer cloaked in what-ifism, if that could be a thing. It is no longer cloaked in obscurity. It is absolutely mainstream now. It was covered extensively on Fox News during Will Cain's show yesterday at length with that CEO. It absolutely is unequivocally, undeniably happening in our country, even though we were told weather modification doesn't happen. Ha, ha, ha. One of our meteorologists here, Darby Bybee, is always saying, or I would not always, okay, consistently telling people they're crazy for saying that weather modification exists. It exists. The conspiracy theories were right. The theorists were right again. So whether it affected what happened there or not, we don't know, but we do know it is happening. It's admitted to, and this guy, the CEO, is on the record all over the place with it. No question. Another aspect of this whole entire debacle and just tragedy in Texas is, according to Charlie Kirk, it was a DEI hire at the Austin Fire Department. The fire chief there declined to deploy resources to help potentially rescue a lot of people in the flood. This DEI hire, the Austin Fire Department hired a DEI fire chief. The reason, according to Charlie Kirk, the Austin fire chief was there because of DEI and failed to deploy resources because he didn't understand the word reimbursement.
Department, as much as we can, reflect the community in which we serve.
All right, we don't have time.
But when you hire people based on race, you're not hiring based on skill. So
we don't have time to get into all of that. We're up against a hard stop here. But check out Charlie Kirk's feed. Didn't understand the word reimbursement. Another huge bombshell that came down yesterday, DHS Director Kristi Noem said after the Maui fires under the Biden FEMA, 1 in 6 survivors of the Maui fires had to trade sexual favors for basic supplies to survive. No lie. To get the supplies they needed, they had to trade sexual favors or other favors with FEMA workers just to get what FEMA was put there to help them with. Can you believe it? Unfortunately, you can. Other really quick notes. Judge blocks Trump's birthright citizenship order despite the Supreme Court ruling. So obviously this has been upheld in court. They tried to, go around this with the Planned Parenthood thing by naming a class. So this is not over yet. This happened today, barring President Trump from enforcing his executive order limiting birthright citizenship. Would you know it? Another U.S. district judge. Who would have thunk it? Yep. No surprise there. And, of course, Biden's doctor pleading the fifth. As Jonathan Turley says, they literally could give him immunity and from implicating himself, give him immunity, and he could tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth when it comes to Biden's decline and the fact that he was asked to lie because he obviously said no or pleaded the fifth to that question. So that's going to do it for today's show. Hopefully we'll be back with you Tuesday at noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you so much for being here. Remember, never stop being a free and critical thinker because the truth is always worth it.
Rate, subscribe, and leave a review. It's how we get the word out amidst the chaos. Thanks for listening to The Ike Wingate Show.